Folks who are online, we're just waiting a couple minutes. The chairman might be having some trouble parking and, we're still awaiting, comptroller's arrival, so we're gonna get started in a few minutes.
Let's see some.
There you go.
We're gonna call the special meeting of the Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments and Central Naugatuck Valley MPO to order. Would you please rise and join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're gonna take care of our items of business first, and then our state controller will make his presentation.
Yeah, so we'll do roll call and then we'll do the MPO meeting and then we'll turn to.
Okay, Sean, we'll start the roll then.
Sure, let's see, from the city of Ansonia, no, we don't have an attendee from the city of Ansonia. From the town of Beacon Falls, First Selectman Smith.
Here.
You, online, from Bethlehem, I believe we have first Selectman Sardi.
Yeah,
Here.
Steve there.
Thank you, sir. City of Bristol, Mayor Caggiano.
Present.
Is here. Do we have anyone from Cheshire? Think so. From the city of Derby online, we have, Mayor DiMartino,
Here.
and, we're also joined by his chief of staff, Linda Fusco.
Here.
Thank you, Linda. Town of Middlebury, First Selectman St. John.
Here.
We are meeting Mayor Hess from the Borough of Naugatuck. From the town of Oxford, First Selectman Temple
There.
is here. We don't have anyone from Plymouth today, I don't believe, no. Mayor Chatfield couldn't make it from Prospect. From the town of Seymour, we have First Selectwoman Dragonis on the line. Thank you. From the city of Shelton, Mayor Loretti. Is here.
Yeah. Last time I checked.
It had First Selectman Mandel logged on from Southside. From town of Thomaston, First Selectman Mon.
Present.
Thank you, sir. City of Waterbury, Mayor Pranaruski.
Here.
Thank you. Town of Wolcott, Mayor Dunn.
Here.
And I don't believe we have anyone from Woodbury today.
But you do have water.
Did I say Watertown?
You skipped.
Oh, there's no line.
No, Mark is here.
And, town manager Mark Ramel from the town of Watertown. I apologize, sir. Okay, we're also joined today by, Daniel Davis from Eversource, from, Ferry and Rabani from Senator Murphy's office is here in the room with us. Jim Nardozzi from Waterbury Development Corp is online. Janine Lupo from, Representative Hayes' office is with us, as well as Meg Hafner online from the Kennedy Collective. I think I got all of our guests, with the exception of, State Comptroller, Sean Scanlon and his staff. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum present.
Okay, so, we got item number 2 is the CNVMPO meeting. For voting members, so the first item is the tip amendment. Who's gonna speak? Rich, go ahead, Rich.
And I should know, Matthew Abbott from Condot is also on the line with us.
Yes, hello, everyone.
Thank you. Yes, so as Rick predicted, we did end up with a summer tip amendment to make sure that we expend all available funds before the end of the fiscal year. Desiree, if you want to move to the next slide. So this is a pretty straightforward project addition. And as you'll see on this chart, there is funds expected to be expended in this year, and that's why this was going this summer. This project is going to do some bridge structural and waterproofing work following some pavement preservation work that has already occurred. Almost all of these within our region are happening on bridges, either on the mainline system or entrance or exit ramps of Interstate 84 here in the city of Waterbury. And so unless there's any questions, we recommend adoption of CNVMPO Resolution 25.
I'll move adoption. I'll second it then. Motion is made and seconded by Bristol. Are there any discussions, comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Now, we have there's two items here, A and B, or do we include both of them?
Those are just the attachments.
Those are
They're just a
attachments.
single action.
Right, okay. Okay, then the next item on our agenda is our state controller, Mr. Scanlon.
Good morning.
Good morning. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you all for having me in here this morning. I know you got a lot to do, so kick us off or kick us out whenever you are need to move on. But I think I know most of you. I'm Sean Scanlon, State Controller of Connecticut. This is Anthony Naples. He's the Director of Policy in my office, and this is Josh Barnes, who I saw on the slide, is the Director of External Affairs. And I'm here this morning because I'm a crazy person who has endeavored down a project of property tax reform. And this is the second COG that I have spoken to about this. The first one was a really, really good conversation where people gave me some really good feedback. Why I'm doing this is because I like to try to get intractable problems. This is what I've spent my whole life doing before I had this job, and what I've tried to do in this job. Some of you know, I have led this big effort to reform the municipal pension system. We've done that over the course of the last 3 years. And now I want to sort of turn my attention to this, which is what somebody in my shoes does every 10 years or so, right? There's a big blue ribbon panel commission. They put out this big report. it gets a couple articles and then people forget about it and they move on because it's a really, really difficult issue. And again, for better or worse, I don't want to just write another report that collects dust. I want to actually try to solve this problem because I think that this is one of the biggest problems that we have as a state. And I don't think we can ever really move forward as a state, grow the state in the way that we want to, unless we actually get serious about property tax reform, which to me, I think really is about municipal finance reform. And what the relationship is between municipalities and the state and what the municipalities are with their own constituents. And I don't want to put out a big report on this and try to do something about this without listening to municipal CEOs, municipal leaders first. And so we sort of spent this summer going around and talking to different stakeholder groups about this. Sure, there's the academics and sure, there's the policy wonks, but you guys live this every single day. And like I said, the first one I did was last week with the NVCOG. Got some incredibly good feedback from mayors and first selectmen about what it is that they think that I should direct my attention to in this process, or what they think the biggest things are that need to be reformed. And the goal, as I told the governor at the end of this, like I just said, is to really come out with something that I hope may not happen overnight, but might put us on a path to just change, because the system, I think, really needs change. I think you all agree with that. The model, I think, of what we've been doing dates back to English feudalism and just doesn't really work anymore in the environment that we live in. And I want to use the bully pulpit that I have as one of our constitutional officers to try to work with you and the people of Connecticut to make a difference and change this. So with that, I think I'll stop, open it up. Again, I joke that people call me crazy for wanting to do this, and that was what almost every mayor and first selectman said, but then they said thanks, because we haven't seen anybody actually trying to do this. So you can tell me I'm crazy, you can say thanks, you can say don't waste your time, you can say whatever you want. But I'm here today really just to hear from you all and hopefully get some good feedback that will help us with this process. So
let me kick it off. What kind of feedback have you gotten back so far?
well, basically, I think the first few minutes of the conversation, the first conversation that I've had with a couple of people I've talked to about this, just how serious are you about this? Like I said, I don't want to just put out a report that says the same three things. Every property tax report has always said, you should diversify municipal revenue sources. The state should give more money to the towns, and we should have some form of regionalization or shared services. Every single property tax reform report has talked about those three things. I think when you talk about them at the 30,000 foot level, nothing ever happens because nobody's gotten down into the weeds on those things. And so I think a lot of the conversation at NVCOG, sure, a lot of the conversation today and going forward will maybe be about what those three things look like. I'll give you a couple examples. I was in Woodstock recently and a guy came up to me and said, look, I am as fiscally conservative as you can get. I'm a big supporter of the president. I hate tax increases, but we should be taxing the Woodstock Fair. And I said, interesting. Why is that? He said, because we every year, it's the biggest thing that happens in our town. We get no money from this. And I think we should start getting money from it. Same as I hear from mayors and first selectmen down by where I live on the shoreline, who in the summertime, our population swells because of things like Airbnb and people coming down there. No municipal revenue is generated by that. So my interest is really hearing not just, well, we should diversify revenue. What does that look like, right? A lot of the folks at NVCOG talked about the need to perhaps just start over when it comes to something like pilot, or get rid of pilot, much more controversial, obviously, but really ripping band-aids off and just having a very open conversation about what this could look like if somebody was willing to blow the entire system up and try to start over.
So, I'll open up to the floor for discussion, but I'll make one controversial comment. Having been the beneficiary of 34 years of dealing with government in Connecticut, I did tell the governor with respect to the housing crisis that everyone talks about, that it is more of a affordability crisis than it is a housing crisis. We're just too expensive. We continue to pile legislation on top of legislation. Nothing ever gets purged or changed, or very little over the course of time. And that really drives the cost of living and working and doing business in Connecticut. Let's start with education. We spend more money than any other country in the free world. You know, where do we stand in terms of testing scores with respect to our peers around the world? So Anybody else like to jump in?
Of course, you knew I would. Sean, thank you for taking this on. I sincerely mean that. Property tax reform is essential for municipalities because as you recognize, the burden on the local taxpayers for residential, property taxes and so on, it is very burdensome. And it's to the point where it's breaking small communities, it truly is. So, CCM had done a study, which I'm sure you're aware of some years ago.
Yeah.
And they came up with a whole bunch of different ideas, many of them which we as CCM members found hard to be able to support as local representatives to our communities. I think it was more honestly, because if we went forward with some of those things, the people probably would have said, hit the road, and we would have been done. But one of the things that I found most interesting, okay, and it would have to come with some very serious caveats, was a sales tax addition, okay, that the state would put on, okay. And the revenue would come back regionally speaking, in my opinion, regionally speaking for instance, the COGs in this particular case, our COG, which I know all of us around this table have great confidence in, to be distributed to the local communities. I don't remember exactly the values that were talked about. I recall 0.5%, but again, that would be something that would be debatable by the legislature. The one big thing, and I say this, is we saw at one point in time, okay, the state legislature said, we'll put 0.5%, you know exactly where I'm going with this, on food services, and then they usurped it immediately, said everyone. So there would have to be some very high level. Now, whether that would require, I don't know, 4/5 majority in the legislature or some sort of referendum on a constitutional act to ensure that that money would continue to flow to the municipalities. I think that would be critical. I remember the dollar values, and they were really quite impressive what 0.5% could bring for communities. And I think that it would have to be examined clearly. The legislature would have to determine some level, but again, that insurance has to be there. Otherwise, it's going to come and go in a heartbeat, and we're right where we are all over again. I think that could be a major addition to municipalities. It could also come with some caveats that as this one, and this would help the legislature, I think, with some caveats that as these funds come into the towns, that we would need to lower the mill rate correspondingly. I think that would be something that the legislature could get its arms around. Instead of, okay, we just get the money and we can continue to do, it's just an addition, so now we can spend more, so to speak. Just a thought I've had, and I think one that at least should be explored.
Can I ask you that, as a recovering legislator?
Yeah.
I think it'd be really hard to convince people that we weren't gonna play with that. And I think you could try to get some language in there that would give you guys confidence and people confidence that we weren't gonna tweak it, but we've all seen that movie before, which is why I was laughing, and everyone else was laughing. Why not just give you control of your own destiny and let you, if you wanted to, if your board of selectmen wanted to, or if your town council wanted to generate your own sales tax?
So I'll give you a couple of reasons.
Okay.
First of all, then if one town adopts it and another doesn't, we become competitive as opposed to working in unison. The other aspect is, I'm going to use Thomaston. We don't have a lot of retail happening in Thomaston. So how much money is going to be generated in Thomaston in itself? Wherein we all shop regionally. Okay, Waterbury is our regional center. Probably the vast majority or much anyways, gets done in Waterbury or Shelton or some of the larger communities, not in our own small backyards like Thomaston. Okay, so therefore, it wouldn't work as effectively unless we did it regionally on a sales basis, and then that comes back to the COGS for redistribution. Probably on a per capita basis, but that would be something that this councils of government and every councils of government would determine how best to redistribute.
Thanks.
I think those are valid points.
Jerry Smith, how about you? What, you're a smaller community,
Well, well, I was just listening to exactly what Tom said, as being a small community, we're kind of caught in a catch-22 where, we have very little retail and very little space for expansion. We're not a distressed municipality. We're not an affluent community. So we're in a spot where we're dependent on the money for education. We're dependent on money from the state. So we do really look for those services to come from, and Beacon Falls, Oxford, Prospect, Middleburg. Well, they've got a lot more space than we do, but especially the small communities like Beacon Falls. We're extremely challenged, and with the reval that's coming up now, where the transition of the reval from what's happened to the commercial and industrial real estate, it's gonna put the burden squarely on the homeowners and the taxpayers. And worse, I'm not looking forward to finding out my numbers from my reval that's about to happen.
Sorry.
Yeah, I know.
Everybody here will agree with that one.
So I wish I had the magic answer for that, for these questions, and I struggle as we all do as to what's the solution. I don't have one.
And Comptroller, the words that I kind of heard you say was, give, own destiny to the towns. I mean, this is gonna be a complaint and I just have to be straightforward with it, but you and I think you've mentioned it before. Motor vehicle tax reform.
Yeah.
What the legislature put us through, on that is ridiculous. You gotta try to either get rid of it or you gotta reform it. And I think the simplest answer this year would have been allow the towns to raise the cap after they went through a reval and saw that the burden shift went to homeowners. And, we're giving people tax reductions on their cars, which is about 40% of the people in Bristol have only cars, 60% have homes. And, it's out of control in Bristol. No control to us, locally to control our own destiny. And I'd love to hear, and I don't know if you've talked about it publicly for everybody, your thought about motor vehicle tax reform and what you think, because I think I heard you before to say that we should get rid of it.
Yeah. Well, I do think we should get rid of it, but the problem is with the legislature, and again, speaking as somebody who served there for a year, not criticizing anybody there, is that you can come up with good ideas there and you can pass them and they're good on your flyer, but they're just basically putting that burden on somebody else.
Yep.
So the example of a property tax cap, right? Who the hell wouldn't be for a property tax cap? It's an easy vote if you're a legislator, whether you're a Democrat or Republican. The problem is if you put a cap in place without any of these other things, you're basically just shifting that burden onto the municipal leaders who are saying, hey, I'm already having to do less with less. And now you're saying that I can't do more if I want to, or if I have to. So I'm open to something like a property tax cap, but only if you get other things that diversify your revenue source or give you other tools. The same thing with the car tax, right? It's very popular to get rid of it, but if you just get rid of it and there's no plan to backfill what you just said is 40% of your revenue, how does that work? The math just doesn't add
Yeah,
up.
not quite 40% of my revenue, by the way, but 40% of the people in town have just car only taxes. I think it's about almost 20% of our revenue, total revenue, but it was $1 million loss to our revenue this year that just shifted right to the homeowners, which they were seeing the effects of reval from 3 years ago, and reval keeps getting worse and worse. I don't know if it's gonna, bound up again in 27, but we need a long-term plan to fix, that problem. So again, this year we had to go through our own local legislative process to change the MSRP. By the way, we talked about CCM. We didn't really talk much about it in the COG, but CCM told the legislature that they were crazy with that number, that it was going to create that problem. But there's $1 billion worth of revenue that's coming in across the state. How do you replace that?
Yep.
I don't know.
So I think it was mentioned earlier that CCM petitioned the legislature to do mandate reform or what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, there's the state mandates.
We talk about those all the time.
Yeah, but look at it, some of this stuff just drives the cost of doing business through the roof and you get no results. We never purge bad legislation. And so if there were some of that, I think that if you started small and picked a couple of topics, I pick on education because it's the single biggest cost that every municipality has. I've used this analogy over the years. State law says you have to provide one seat for every butt in transportation. Well, if you got 5,000 kids in your system and only 3,500 are taking the bus, you know, why couldn't you ask for a waiver from the parents? You know, stand in front of any elementary school or high school or middle school in the state, and you've got a lot of traffic of parents dropping their kids off. You know, that's $1 million plus ticket for everybody.
Yeah.
So I think it's simple things like that help.
It's not a simple problem, but special education is the main reason for this problem. I mean, city of Bristol, right in the middle, right? We're not a real big city, but we're certainly not a small town. And, you know, we have an estimated figure of about $6.6 million over the last 3 years. It was underfunded by state mandates put on us by special education, and it's put us into a real fiscal crisis in town, which we're trying to make up in 1 year, which isn't right either, with the current Board of Education. But, you know, we have to fix that. That definitely should be looking at regionalization. You know, we're sending kids off. I think we had, it was 11 kids that cost $2.1 million to educate. And these are kids with special needs. Trust me, they all should get the care they deserve, but they don't need to be bused to, you know, down to North Haven from Bristol. And, again, 56% on probably average, everybody here spending on education or more in their towns.
George?
Yes, I'm first selectman in Oxford. Jerry, I had the opportunity this year to do a reevaluation. A lot of people came to my house with pitchforks and torches. And
I should build a wall.
that is really, really a tough thing to go through. One of the major concerns that we get is we have a large, over 55 community. And the major concern that we get is what do we do with seniors? And like you say, you know, if you give the seniors a break, you're shifting the burden. Now, you know, that's fine, you know, to take care of the seniors, but what about the single mom that's trying to raise 3 kids? We do nothing for her, except raise her tax. Or, you know, that's just an example. So, you know, I think that some sort of an equitable break for seniors, you know, I think that's something that we should look at. Another thing is, we have, a airport in Oxford, Waterbury Airport. Waterbury just puts their name up. Yeah, that's it. But
Gotta learn how to monetize.
Yeah.
I don't wanna give them the revenue though either, and they start getting revenue from it.
Nice, stuck your runway. Yeah, in there.
you know, they get the name Waterbury Oxford Airport, but Middlebury, Ed, correct me if I'm wrong, but you share in that. And we get nothing for it. We get, you know.
Complaints.
But that's not an awful lot of money. Like by maybe 140,000 a year. If you see those planes, a lot of them are, you know, Lear jets, and I mean, really beautiful planes. You know, and it could be a great opportunity, but, you know, for development, but it takes up an awful lot of our land. Well, get anything for it. And, you know, the state, it's everything. I mean, you know, that's kind of a local complaint. I get it, you know. But I really think that, as far as equity is concerned, that we should really consider what we can do for seniors, the lesson their burden. I mean, you know, these people, I talked to them over the weekend. You know, they're in, you know, $700,000 houses, but their taxes went up to $2,000. And, you know, you might say, well, I have no sympathy for them, but, you know, it's difficult to make ends meet on you know, when you start out with a certain, economic parameter, you know, every year it gets tougher to, you know, make ends meet. So, no, that's what I think that we should do, take a look at that.
Can I ask you and the group 3 controversial questions?
That's my middle name.
Please do, Sean.
So controversial question number one is to your last point, George, about make it more equitable for seniors. I live in a house with the exact same square footage as my next door neighbor, who is in their mid-70s and retired. We pay the same property tax despite the fact that I have significantly different income and I have children and different situations than my neighbors. Is there a world in which we could ever look at that and there'd be a difference between the kind of taxpayer you pay when it comes to the property tax? That's number one. Number two is when it comes to the revals, there was a lot of folks in NVCOG and my conversations around the state who have said it's hard for us to kick the can on revals, but if the state mandated that everyone had to phase in reval over a certain period of time, it would make our lives easier politically. So I'm wondering about that. And then, sorry, I'm giving you a lot of controversy at one time. The third and most controversial of all was what I alluded to earlier is it time to break the pilot system and significantly change that and rip that Band-Aid off?
Yeah, I would agree with that. You know, that one's gonna be, that's a little selfish on my part, or part of my town, but, you know, on the other hand, you know, we know that there's a lot of revenue. I mean, it's, you know, they just rebuilt another hangar, I mean, it's beautiful. Well, we see no benefit whatsoever from this. And, you know, we have to have our firemen up there, we have to have our police, or, you know, so it's, you know, the only thing we're allowed to get is airplanes, and basically you have to really depend on the honesty of the pilots, how much the plane's worth, you know, it's amazing, your jets are worth $250, you know. You know, so, I mean, once again, that might be a localized complaint, but I think that's what you gotta get.
Yeah, every town has a localized complaint
Yeah.
about pilot though, right?
Yeah.
So it's exaggerated if you're New Haven, right? And 60% of your property is not taxable, but it's also an impact on you if you have an airport, if you have a hospital, if you have a school, if you have a church, I mean, all this stuff adds up.
Yeah.
How about the tax difference between people with income and different needs?
Sean, as you talked about, if I may, I'm
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt, and I want everybody else to talk, but answer question number one. You're just shifting to crack property tax burden. If you give one particular group, right, preferential treatment, it just shifts the burden to another group. So I don't ever see that as a solution. I forget, what was question two? I'm sorry.
But just
Reval phase.
on one though, quickly. Is it shifting the burden for preferential treatment, or is it coming up with a tax system that is, to his point, equitable? Makes sense, right? My wife and I send 2 kids to our schools. We have income. These people are retired and seniors, they don't have income, they pay the same property tax.
And I would agree,
Yeah.
well, I get your point there, and because you'll hear that from every senior.
Yeah.
You know, why do I have to pay so much? I don't have any kids in school, but, and my retort always has been, but someone did this for you.
Sure.
You know? So I've always had difficulty with shifting property tax, personally speaking. You know, whether it's for seniors, of which I am one, by the way, or veterans or anybody else. Veterans, I'm a little bit more flexible on, simply because they are, you know, and I won't go into the weeds on that. So that's just my thought on question number one.
Yeah.
What was question two? I'm sorry.
So question one was about the district
Shifting.
tax rate.
Yeah.
Number two was about the mandatory reval spreading or spacing for every town.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that honestly, the local authorities can handle on their own. I know George differs on that with me, but to me, it's if you as a town council or a board of selectmen, in my case, see the need to do that, to spread it out over a period of time instead of implementing the reval all in one full swoop, well, I think that's our responsibility. And I think we can handle that. Okay. And I'm kind of losing my train. The last question again. Pilot. So in terms of pilot reform, I think what I'm hearing you say is everybody gets taxed, right? whether you're Yale University, a church, or a nonprofit, everybody pays some sort of tax. Is that what you're indicating?
I mean, I'm not trying to lose my next election, but
Right.
yeah, that's essentially
Yeah,
what I'm saying.
I hear you, I hear you. Look, and honestly, for certainly like a town like Haven, Yale eating up so much of its property, okay? Or in Thomaston, albeit it wouldn't go down to the state as much as federal government owns 1/3 of my real estate. 1/3. And they give me a little less than $1,000 a year, but that's a different animal, because you're not talking about what the federal government would do. But I could see where some sort of serious pilot reform would certainly help the larger communities, and in a smaller way with us, although there'd be a lot of screaming, I'm sure, from churches and other nonprofits, then, yeah, making that property taxable is a difficult one. And I don't, honestly, I can't see the legislature taking that hit, because that's what would happen. They would have to take that hit.
Yeah, listen, you can't do this you can't do any of these things overnight.
No,
right?
absolutely not.
But is there a way to
Implement it over a period of time.
to phase it in and have different tax rates? Obviously, again, a large university system or a large profitable hospital is different than a small Catholic or Episcopalian church, right? That
Yeah.
their ability to pay taxes are different, and so you have to account for that in this system. I think what I'm getting at though, and what this exercise is all about for me and hopefully for all of you, is if you took politics out of it, which we all try to do all the time anyway,
We try.
what would we do, right? It wouldn't look like we do it now. And so if we want to envision what it looks like, everyone says it's really hard until you get it done, right? And I just am interested in, again, maybe it's a crazy mission on my part, but to have these conversations and to rip off the Band-Aids and put my capital behind it, but I want to do that in partnership with municipalities. And that's why, again, I'm sort of going around and doing this. And again, I don't know how much time you have, so cut this off when you need to, but I
The
hope
last
that.
item on the agenda, so
Oh, okay, then,
Yeah.
I'm gonna fix it.
Mayor?
So very, very interesting, and I commend you for taking it on, because I don't think there's a real upside unless you come up with magic answers that we haven't done yet. So, but just taking them in somewhat in order. So for a city like Waterbury, where you talk about the elderly tax burden, and I get that we have a lot of elderly people here, and so we just went through reval, where this year was year 3 and a 4-year phase in, which means effectively you're telling people that over the next 4 years, you're getting tax increase year after year after year. And that was, by the way, was a campaign issue when I ran 2 years ago, right? Which I guarantee the tax increase for years. But the issue in a city like Waterbury is there's really no one to shift that burden to, because most of our residents are poor, whether they're elderly or just starting out, raising families, working, they all struggle. So it's really hard to make that shift anymore. They're all struggling. We have a few neighborhoods where people can afford those kids and taxes are higher. But in general, it's not an easy burden to shift with that forth, as long as you keep all of the tax structure locally within the municipality. It doesn't really work well, right? So the phase in, as I said, we've done it for years. It seemed to help alleviate it a little bit. Frankly, I think when we did this, we were hoping that the market would settle a little bit. We might be able to straighten it out before it doesn't look like it. And I think we're all expecting that we're going to have to do another rebound. It's not going to be pretty in the coming years. And as far as the pilot goes, yeah, I think, we don't have as much as some of the other cities that are not getting paid. But I do worry that if you start taking the tax breaks away from some of the nonprofits who are providing desperately needed services here, that's money that then comes to the city rather than providing services. And we're not geared up as a city to replicate those services necessarily. I think we do it effectively. So it becomes tough. I mean, for us, I think something that looks more like regionalization and taking into account the fact that the 4 cities in a state like Connecticut, that's a serious home rule, pick up a lot of the costs for the surrounding municipalities, right? That need to be covered somehow. It's just hard to do here. But we do have the drug clinics and we have the homeless shelters and we have all of the things that are difficult. The schools, everybody suffers, but our numbers of special needs students continue to rise year over year. 70% of our students in the school this year are dual language students coming from tough backgrounds. 54 different schools that spoken throughout the year. Those are hard things. We struggle. We're short still about 40 special ed teachers, just trying to get them in. And throwing a lot of money at it isn't always the answer. answer, it's not solving problems. There's a lot more that has to go. You know, you want to deal with school issues. That comes back, I'll be honest, goes back to families and the structures that these kids are growing up in, are missing now.
Yeah.
And we have kids who do phenomenally well in schools, but if you were to see their family structure, it would not surprise you. So there's a much larger picture here that needs to be done, but something has to be done. It is a struggle for people. Even the car taxes, you know, you structured the car taxes to lower them, but we have a ton of people who were at that 20-year period that actually had their taxes go from, you know, $16 to $150, right? Now, that's not a lot, probably nobody sitting around this table would notice the difference. But for some of the people in Waterbury, they have 25 and 30-year-old cars that have been together, spit baling wire, that difference of $120 is huge for them, you know, on a regular basis. So those are real, you know, the real issues there that have to be sort of addressed.
I'm curious, you mentioned the phase in, Waterbury often a few years ago, or did many of your towns opt to do a phase in, whether for a previous revale or looking to do that for their next revale?
Not with us, we didn't do phase-ins.
Okay.
I chose in Bristol not to do it
It just
because
kicks
it
the
was
can down
kicking
the
the
road,
can down
makes
the
it
road.
worse.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't think that solves the problem.
It doesn't solve the problem, but it kept it from going for a homeowner getting a $600 to $1,000 to a $1,200 tax increase in 1 year.
But you guaranteed that over 4 years.
Right.
So. It's
No, I know,
going.
it's,
And so
but it's a little bit at a
progressive.
time. Well, yeah, I'm not saying it's the
a Band-Aid
solution, but
approach.
it is.
No, and you do it.
Yeah.
Again, I think what Sean said is that's politically expedient.
Right.
Right? So a lot of the legislative decisions that are made in the state level are politically expedient for this too. I'm gonna just talk a little bit about different demographics as well,
But
because.
just one,
Oh, go ahead.
it is politically speaking, but also to their Paul's point, it's also an affordability issue, which is what we're talking about, right? It's somebody's ability to pay for that right up front may be different than some other taxpayer on their street.
Yeah.
And if you phase it in, you in theory are giving them notice that you gotta figure this out. I mean,
But all cities and towns are very different. I mean,
right,
Bristol,
no
we're
doubt.
kind of in the middle. We have 60% homeowner, occupied homeowner, rate. Most of those people can afford it, and the people that are renting apartments, their rent's gonna go up down the road, but, we're relatively able to afford it. In the smaller towns, I would think more people are able to afford it, and the bigger the city's not. Just to go back to the different demographics, so, and this is another little kind of off-topic thing, but topic thing is the legislature approved the ability to reduce taxes for people in condos, right? I think, I forget what it is, about 30%, up to a 30% reduction. You know, we're not even contemplating that, because now you're thinking about condos. Yes, they don't have trash service. We don't plow their condo units.
That's why we
But
let
they,
them into the
but,
first.
but they,
place.
exactly, but they still have to, they have to pay taxes. So you're gonna be fighting the haves versus the have-nots on the demographics, and again, another Band-Aid kind of sexy thing for legislators to talk about and things to give things, and to be honest, you know, in local elections, the average age of the voter is about 65, so we're all gonna do senior tax relief the best that we can, but it's not solving the problem. You're just gonna be pushing it onto other people.
Yeah.
So I would be totally against that. I don't think it helps at all.
I don't think it helps either, and again, that's why I was going back and pressing a little bit on Ed is just. Every time I open the newspaper, there's another town that's referendum is going down, right? Because in these communities, people are pitted against one another. And that's why I wonder if there's different ways to do this, where instead of every single senior, unless you're the ones like Ed who altruistically believe that you're paying it forward for somebody else, or you watch your grandkids, are coming out to vote no on every single budget, no matter what, including the community that I live in. Because they're getting squeezed out of their homes they lived in for 30, 40 plus years. And their next door neighbor has 4 kids and uses the school system. If we change the way that the tax is paid itself, again, not politically easy to do, does it decrease that pressure? And then it also decreases the pressure on the legislatures to keep giving these one-off gimmicky things that maybe have good intentions, but they then end up pitting people against one another.
Online, we have, First Selectwoman Draconis has had her hand up for a little while.
Hi, Anne Marie.
Hey, how is everyone? Sorry not being there. But Kurt's out of the office and we both can't be out of the office. So a couple of things, you know, we do have the homestead tax, as a couple of my peers have mentioned, and the homestead tax is great because it goes for the condominiums. But when you have that, they're also not paying for the trash, you're not paying for the road being plowed, and you know, in George and I can both answer this because we share a condominium on both of our borders. So they're like, we don't pay for kids in the school, we don't pay for trash, we don't pay for the plowing, we don't pay for, we have to pay for our water hydrants. What is the town giving us? And I'm like, well, you do drive on our roads, sort of to give some laughter there. But if we do it for that condominiums, then what about the other condominiums? And then if we say we give it to the seniors, the 65 and olders, because I am looking at a 65-25, meaning you're over the age of 65, you've lived in the same home for more than 25 years, and the home is in your name and you're still living there and you're not a snowbird. So we are looking at something like that. We discussed the spreading it out over the 4 years, but my thing is then their taxes are continuing to go up over the next 4 years. And then come the reevaluation on the 5th year, their taxes may go back up again. So they're continually paying for an increase every year. The state of Connecticut had a circuit breaker program, but then they stopped funding it. So the town is funding that. Plus we have our own going in. So maybe if we didn't have to fund the circuit breaker, then maybe the town can take their money and just say, well, it's per our regulations and not the state regulations. So we're kind of looking at that, and then to give the tax break to the seniors, which I truly believe. I mean, my parents were seniors in Shelton living, and they still had to pay for kids going to the school when they didn't have kids going to the school. But what about the single parents or the parents that have a home and they have the kids in the school and their taxes are still going up? So if it's not like a one thing fits everybody. We truly have to look at it. And then I heard a rumor, Sean, about the car taxes going away in 5 years and the potential of the house assessments going from a 70 to a 90% assessment. So I mean, I heard that as well. So I think we all want to help the seniors. We want to help the single parents out there. We don't want to put the tax burden on our taxpayers. We want to bring more businesses in, but that's kind of tough because doing business in Connecticut is kind of hard as well. So I think we all need, and I think it's wonderful that you're out here to ask for our feedback and get our input on it. We just need to come to some sort of common sense, some sort of thing that's going to help not just our seniors, but our younger generation as well. I think I heard that market rate to own an apartment or to own a home nowadays, you got to make $65 an hour. And there's no kid coming out of college making $65 an hour. And if that is the case, then I'm going to have my daughter buy a house and I'm moving in with her so I don't have to support her any longer. But we have to look at what's affordable for the people in Connecticut. And $65 an hour just to rent an apartment is not affordable for anybody. Especially if you're sitting in our mayor seats, which some are part-time and some salaries just aren't there. That's just my feedback.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Anne Marie.
Can I ask another open-ended question of folks? One thing we haven't really touched on really is shared services regionalization. And again, historically, this has been a state top-down kind of edict where the state is saying you have to do this or you should do this. I'm wondering if we looked at it from the other way, which was to find some incentive structure for towns that do decide that they want to do it. Town A, town B, voluntarily say, hey, this works for us. Our communities have similarities. If we do this, what is the state going to give us as a reward for that behavior, as opposed to mandating it from the top? And I'm wondering if people have thoughts about that.
Participating in the meeting I have going on.
Okay. I think that's a
Yeah,
separate
I'm
meeting.
sorry, forgot. No,
We've been, I've been on committees for that, different organizations, well, here at COG and down in Bristol. When I was first mayor, trying to do this, and we've accomplished it. The state did, if you regionalized and bought a sweeper or a truck, they would give you so much money toward it. But I think it's difficult. I think some towns and cities are doing that. They're trying to work together with positions. But we've always put the positives on one page and the negatives on the other. And some reason the negatives always, there's more negatives than positives, meaning unions, who's going to drive the truck, who's going to be responsible for it. I'm talking vehicles now, but it could be personnel.
Yeah.
Who covers it if the person trips and falls, and is it workers' comp, what town did they fall in, do they take it, so little things like that. So I don't know if that's somewhere we could help. But I think we've been doing a lot of work on, trying to create that and save money,
Well, I think one of the
again, it
biggest,
just falls short.
one thing,
Trying to figure that out on the COG level as well, with Rick, as to what kinds of services the COG can truly provide, and they do provide. Some of those are, we just went through one where the COG actually did the planning aspect for the town of Thomaston for our next, P.O.C.D. So. Somebody's
Oh,
calling me.
my cue.
So we're trying to do that as much as possible, and I'm a big supporter of COGS, and I'd like to see more happen here. And of course, if the COGS are incentivized to do that as well, then that would be beneficial to all. I think many of us, or at least I know I have for years, and I currently have an interlocal agreement with Watertown, okay? And to provide for some of our animal control services. I've been doing that kind of thing, and I think a lot of our towns have done those because that opportunity is there where it presents itself. But I think more can be done, and I would agree with the regionalization concept. More could be done, and we've all talked about that for years, the back office aspect, that we don't necessarily have to have someone in our offices there to do. It just, for whatever reason, it truly has not advanced.
but the reason it hasn't advanced, Tom, I'm gonna put you on the spot, is really because you need collective bargaining reform, right? I mean, that's the back end third rail, because there's always a third rail behind all these things.
For the
That's it,
interlocal
right?
aspects.
Well, that's a little bit of it, I mean, some maybe it wouldn't be such a problem. I just think it was, I don't know, every time we were close to getting somewhere, it just was something else was negative.
Yeah.
And it just couldn't happen.
But
That's gotta be part of it.
I would say the collective bargaining reform, the rules that, the laws that have not passed over the last several sessions. I think if they had passed, we would see many, many more consolidated services across municipal boundaries. The fact that my friends in labor would not support a bill that allowed intermunicipal collective bargaining. I mean, we weren't getting rid of collective bargaining. We just wanted the ability to do it between existing bargaining units.
Yeah.
And across those boundaries, and that got knocked down. I think that's a significant piece of it. One of the things that I wanted to raise. Fundamentally, you talk about a tax fairness issue. When you talk about tax reform, in Connecticut. First Selectman Temple mentioned, someone in the $700,000 home in Oxford, seeing a significant tax increase. I still pay more taxes on a $200,000 house in Derby than those people pay in Oxford. And we all have to sort of keep it in perspective statewide. Our tax burden is significantly lower than our peer states. We're lower than Massachusetts, we're lower than New York, we're lower than New Jersey. People in Connecticut think we're in this insane tax bracket. We actually pay less, overall. But what it really comes down to is home rule. And that's the challenge I think that you're taking on. If you don't mind me putting it in those books. Because the ability to get any of this done requires towns to cooperate and prevents towns from making individual decisions about these things. That's the hardest part here. Education, public safety, but education is the prime example. I put a draft paper in front of this board several years ago, also a white paper I did with Bill Sievers for Governor Malloy on education reform. We have 6 public school districts in the state. They're called RESTs. And they run education all over Connecticut. There's significant savings and significantly more fairness in the type of education that could be provided if we got municipalities out of the education business. They could opt out of the system. They could decide, if you're a town that doesn't get very much money under the ECS as a percentage of your budget, then I don't want to be part of the state system. I want to keep my education system in my town. That's fine, but you don't get any more state aid if you opt out of that. Opting into a system where all the infrastructure gets turned over to the rest and lets them run school districts in an efficient way with the right number of students in classrooms and the larger course selections is going to improve educational results and lower everybody's costs. Those are the kinds of issues that really get us to fairness and how we do it. I don't know what to do, to your point and your concern earlier, people don't trust the General Assembly. If you get rid of home rule, you're putting it under the control of the state, nobody trusts that, right? Because it usually goes away once it gets created. But by the same token, leaving it in every town, I'll leave you with the last story that people think is apocryphal, it's not. Towns won't cooperate together to bring in business unless they're getting the footprint of the building they can tax in their town. There's no benefit to the taxpayers in one town to having their leaders spend money to attract a business that's going to create 100 six-figure salary jobs, 500 jobs. There's no immediate benefit in our tax system for a town to support that if it's in another town and it's going to be taxed in another town. Because there's no other benefit in terms of revenue. So
That's a really interesting point, because you look at something like ASML in Wilton, right? They are hiring thousands and thousands of people, and Wilton itself cannot meet the demand of housing and infrastructure, right? So clearly people that are working at ASML are living in Oxford and Southbury and other towns. I've never heard anybody talk about this, but I wonder if there is a way to sort of come up with some sort of formula about that.
I think ultimately you have to trust the state to collect the taxes and redistribute them back to the towns, but admittedly, I think that's a hard sell.
Well, that may go back to what we talked about earlier, the regionalized sales tax, where company pays the tax and you're in the same COG region, and then there is a benefit that gets dispersed back, but yeah.
And my last comment,
I gotta go, but thank you very much.
animal control stuff, we tried in our grant. We have 10% participation with one town, couldn't get another town to join us, then it's turned down because it's not good enough. So small steps might help there as well too. And I think it's gotta be forced. It's gotta be, because we're just not gonna do it.
At St. John,
Yeah, I gotta run. Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, the controller at St. John from Middlebury. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to take on such controversial areas. I give you a lot of credit for that. One thing that has not been discussed today is something we deal with, which is, I don't think unique to us, but we're the home of a very large school that is a nonprofit, own extensive holdings in our community, have all kinds of real estate all over our town. They do it this way. They provide for from the head of school right down to their staff housing. Okay, so, well, what's the big thing? They just don't pay on the campus, but they have all these homes and everything all spread out. Well, what's the big deal? What are you making a big deal out of it for? I'm making a big deal because we have 12 kids in our school system, okay, that come from their faculty. And they don't pay basically any taxes on anything. Now you're gonna say, well, what happens if there's a rental home or something like that? Well, at least somebody's paying the taxes, even though there may be young folks living in that school-age children in that school. And I think this is a problem in many of the cities and towns within Connecticut that have a lot of these facilities. Ours may be somewhat unique where they provide housing for their staff. So that means they got property all over the place, and they're not, they've been buying a lot of our very expensive real estate. And then, so they once gave us a payment in lieu of taxes, and that has dwindled over the years and gotten smaller and smaller. And of course, when the great pandemic appeared, that was the greatest excuse in the world to not pay anything. And we've seen nothing out of them, but yet the school population continues to increase. So just a little something that I am surprised that the legislature has not addressed that. Because I think when you look at places like Wesleyan and you look at Yale and you look at all these big facilities that have massive investments, I mean, massive, that's a burden, because we're providing all the services to these communities, including educating their kids.
Sure.
So that's an area where it seems to always I appreciate all the other comments and they're well taken, but that's an area I think that impacts many of our communities in Connecticut, that you're seeing next to nothing in any kind of a contribution from these people, considering the amount of services they get.
I appreciate that. I have a note here. I know we're losing people. So if I can just say, Mr. Chair,
Please, Sean.
I don't want this to be a one and done conversation, and I know this is a difficult topic. And if there are things that any of you want to say privately, I would love to come and get a cup of coffee with you at your town hall or your city hall and continue this conversation. And then I hope as we kind of go forward and I meet with all the different COGs and all the different stakeholders, that I can circle back with all of you on this and bounce some of these ideas off of you before we bring this thing to Broadway. I know I'm under no illusion that, you know, I'm not a magician here. I'm not going to get unanimity and everyone's going to cry from the rafters that this is the most brilliant plan ever. But I think if I get enough of a consensus around it, that it can start a conversation, I will have done my job. And then if I can keep pressing on it until things get done, I will have really done the job. I just, like I said, I don't want to put out a report for the sake of putting out a report. I want to actually do something on this and I'd love to work with you on it. I know it's going to be hard, but I appreciate the advice and feedback and everything you gave me today. And I just hope we can continue the conversation.
Well, Sean, I would say you'd certainly be welcome back here, or I think I'm speaking for everyone, maybe not correctly, but I doubt so. We would be willing to, I know I would be willing to speak with you individually at any time regarding this. We do have, Mayor Gonis, excuse me, Anne Marie. I gotta just go with that. Who would like to address you again? Anne Marie, please. Anne Marie, I don't think you heard me.
Sorry.
No, that's quite all right.
Always stay on mute. Right. Oh, thank you. So we're talking about regionalization, and Seymour, we regionalized with Oxford, Beacon Falls, and we did regionalize with Ansonia on personnel, as everybody knows. But the biggest thing I feel as a first selectwoman from Seymour is that we get so criticized when we regionalize, especially with personnel. You know, oh, like Sheila was our EDC person. Well, how do you know that they're not giving that person to Ansonia, you know, instead of going to Seymour? So I think it's our residents are our biggest critics, and those are the ones that we have to listen to. But I'm all for regionalization, and I think that is something that we should all be looking into. You know, living down south, that is what they do. They regionalize a lot, and that's how they save a lot of money. So I would be all for discussing regionalization as well.
Yeah, Maria, I think that's kind of what I was getting at is there a way to incentivize it from the state so that when you make a decision to do that, you could say to that resident who says, what the heck, how do I know what this person is going to do? He said, well, I don't know, we're going to figure that out. But what I do know is we're going to get $200,000 of additional state money because we just regionalized this service. There's got to be something for you to go back to your people and sell them on doing this, or some incentive for you to do it, I think.
So
Yes. Oh,
Sheila,
through you, Mr. Chairman, I just want to piggyback on what Anne Marie said. There are so many duplicitous services and crossovers that there's so much money to be saved, in addition to maybe a state funded incentive for regionalization. I agree with that. Sorry to interrupt.
if I may comment on that as well, Sean, my thought is we've looked at, I've looked at with the COG at times doing various different tasks on a region, well, it's truly not regional, but at least the COG doing some of our tasks. And what has happened in some cases is the cost of doing business for the COG to do it for me is probably greater, maybe greater than what I could do it in my own community. So to address that, as opposed to giving me the money, which might work fine too, because it might be more popular that way at a local level to say that. My thought is simply direct more funding for the COG to perform those tasks, should they want to be implemented. So if Rick came forward to you and said, we're able to, I'm just gonna pull this one right out of the hat because it's something we've been talking about, regionalizing as assessing, right? So if therefore the state incentivized that greater, by providing greater funding to the COG directly, and hence less to the towns wherein we could save money in the process, it amounts to the same thing. Only more directly funding the COG.
Sure. Makes sense. Thank you all very much.
Okay.
Really.
Before I let him go, is there anyone else here present, that would like to, Mark, would you like to address?
No, I think most of the topics are the things that are top of my head as well.
Okay, before I say, anybody else have anything else they'd like to say to Mr. Control, Sean Scanlon?
Just one quick thing.
Please.
I promise everybody.
No, please, George.
We, when we talked about phase in before, and we went with the phase in totally. And, that's only 50% of the mathematics to come up with a tax bill. And it's really about the tax bill. It's not about what your house is evaluated at our mill right now is 20, which is pretty good, but, we got reevaluated. So I just wanted, we can't lose sight of that.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, I'll ask one more time. Anyone else got anything they want to address from Mr. Scanlon? Hearing none, I'm gonna thank you very much once again for coming, Sean. I truly appreciate your efforts. You're doing things that no one else wants to do, okay? And I applaud that. I really do. You've been very active as a controller, and I just wanted to know, personally, I appreciate that, as I think others do as well.
Thank you. Ed.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thanks,
Anything
everybody.
else you'd like to say to us?
No, just thank you and appreciate the time today and look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you all.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
That said, motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn, who? Someone. George?
I'm gonna have the donut today.
Yeah, second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much all for attending.
We're on vacation.
I know.
I will run.
Thank you.